Okay, let's go over the case wrap-up and treatment strategy for Ali. So one of the key things with you look at Ali is, there's some ongoing issues. The goal with his clinical management is to improve his quality of life. It's not going to be to find some condition that's not been diagnosed and then figure it out and then he's forever cured. So what we really need to do is just look at how we can improve his digestive function, his brain function, his endurance levels, and it's pretty clear, after the whole workup in history, that he's got significant bipolar patterns of major depressive disorder on one side and OCD on the other side. So for me, when I was done evaluating the case, my impressions of everything are the following 3 paragraphs. I'll go through them and explain everything paragraph by paragraph. Ali appears to have a history of epilepsy in childhood with development and progression into bipolar disorder into adulthood. There is growing evidence that bipolar and epilepsy are comorbid conditions and share underlying pathophysiological mechanisms leading to abnormal neurochemical discharges. These patterns of genetic origin have not been found to be curable with any forms of current treatment. So there's a lot of research now that shows people that have epilepsy have, as they develop into adulthood, bipolar disorders and other neurochemical mood disorders, major depressive disorders. And to put it really simply, their neurons are just not functioning ideally. They're dysfunctional. They have abnormal discharges, and it's not related to any neurotransmitter issue. The main medication that's used, anti-seizure medications, just calms down neurons so it can stop seizure activity. But there are typically lifelong, ongoing neurochemical imbalances. And some people will say, well, I had a person who had seizures when I was a kid, and that's different. That's not necessarily full-blown epilepsy. So that's important to know. Now, for those of you that do like neuro rehab, functional neurology, chiropractic neurology, whatever you want to call it, you're not going to give this guy like eye movements and some neurological therapy exercises and make everything go away. That's not how it works. It's all about the neurochemical response that's involved here. That's really a factor. It's not about connectivity or plasticity. That seems to work best when you do those types of neurorehabilitation patterns. Okay, there are clear patterns of childhood developmental delays associated with attention deficit and obsessive compulsive disorders that have progressed into adulthood in combination with significant episodes of bipolar depression and obsessive compulsive activity. These abnormal patterns of neurochemical discharge activity may play some role in disruption of the brain-gut axis. So obviously his brain is not functioning as well as, and then really think about his entire nervous system is having dysfunctional neurodischarge activity. That includes the gut nervous system and the brain nervous system. It just seems to be expressed more. So I go on to say, furthermore, there are indications that the onset of autoimmunity occurred at age 30 when brain-gut axis patterns were starting to develop. These include a combination of identified antibodies that include arthritic protein antibodies, myelin basic protein antibodies, and thyroid antibodies. There's also the autoimmune expression of alopecia areata. Myelin basic protein antibodies may be a component in disruption of the brain-gut axis. There are clear indications of dysfunctional enteric nervous system function and quite possibly a combination of impaired enteric nervous system neurodevelopment in combination with injury to the enteric plexus from autoimmunity. These patterns may play a significant role in chronic patterns of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and intolerance to dietary carbohydrates and sugars. Laboratory tests indicate no sensitivity to dietary proteins or loss of oral tolerance. Although thyroid antibodies have been elevated in repeated measures, there are no patterns of hypothyroidism yet. So simply put, it seems like there's these neurodevelopmental disorders. Turns 30, and even maybe an H. pylori infection could have been the onset for these things. It's hard to tell, but that H. pylori infection may have been the onset. He starts to have his gut dysfunction starting to take place. This is where his myelin antibodies may have started to be expressed. He has chronic knee pain with RA. Some people will start in the knees, most people start in the hands. But he has those patterns that are clearly changed with triggers like lectins and nightshades and so forth. So there's that autoimmune lectin agglutination type of pattern that's there. And he's got thyroid antibodies. However, he hasn't been hypothyroid yet. So we got to see if there's a hypothyroidism pattern that's existed. He hasn't had any real lab work in 4 years, so we have to see that's a role. So thyroid hormones could be something that really significantly impact his function, his gut function, his brain function, his intestinal motility, his neurochemical balance. But we have to see, what's there. Now, obviously, it's not going to be the cure. It's just a variable that's there. So laboratories that I want him to do, he hasn't had blood work in a long time, just a complete blood chemistry profile. Basically, metabolic panel, CBC, lipid panel, thyroid panel, homocysteine, reactive protein, fibrinogen, 25-hydroxy-D, iron panel, urinalysis. I want to get an updated stool antigen test because that could be an issue. And then I want to give him a laboratory requisition form that measures TSH, T4, T3, and reverse T3 when he's depressed to see if there's any shifts into hypothyroidism if we haven't initially identified with the first panel that we're going to do. He felt that was important. He wanted to check that out. So obviously, you always want to support patient intuition and look at those things. So we'll see as he gets into a major depressive pattern when his bipolar shifts into that depressive state. We'll see if there's any abnormal or difference of changes in his thyroid function there. I don't think there's going to be much, but since the patient had some intuition, I'm going to honor and respect it and see if that something's there. No additional imaging testing at this time, and he basically has to follow the guidelines of a FODMAP diet, autoimmune paleo diet, and strategy to stabilize his blood sugar levels. So he's got to really overlap all these three things. If he does that, he's not going to have any bloating, and his digestive symptoms are going to go away. And it's just the lifestyle he's going to have to adapt. And the question is, for how long? For the rest of his life. And if he maintains that, he'll have no symptoms and have no gastrointestinal bloating and no, gut to brain disruption. So we need to be aware of that. Now, his autoimmunity is a big concern. Now, if he continues to eat foods that cause distension and bloating, that distension and bloating is going to cause more translocation of bacteria in the small intestine, more intestinal permeability, more immune dysregulation, more immune dysfunction, and his autoimmune diseases can definitely get expressed on top of everything else he has. So he's just going to have to figure this out and make sure that he gets to the point he has no gas and bloating and also maintains his blood sugar stability. So I broke his case management into different phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So in phase 1, one of the first things I want to figure out is if adding a meal before bedtime increases the ability to sleep through the night while following restrictions of a FODMAP diet. So this past week before the initial exam, he had absolutely no bloating, and he had to get rid of his chickpeas and his maple syrup, and it seemed to work for him. He's not sleeping as well. So he might be getting hypoglycemic at night because he's just not getting enough caloric intake to help build his glycogen reserves. So he's not able to sleep through the night. So remember, when you're asleep, you're using up glycogen as your fuel source, but you have to have enough calories to be able to make some glycogen. So then when you go to bed, you can access that glycogen so you can feed your brain with glucose and maintain sleep. People that don't eat enough for their caloric intake and their ability to make glycogen will typically have glycogen depletion early and then start waking up. So we got to have him follow the FODMAP diet restrictions that work for him, that don't not cause bloating, and also I want him to add in some exogenous ketones before bedtime. Exogenous ketones are a really great way to get some fuel to the brain that isn't going to aggravate SIBO patterns, so that works well. And then add digestive enzymes with each meal, HCl, pancreatic acid, lipases. He needs to go back on. He's on these before, but I want him to take Enzymix Pro. It's a combination of all those in a supplement. He felt he really should take some glutathione. So we're going to give him some liposomal glutathione. He felt it'd be a good idea before his workouts. So we're going to have him take 10 milliliters of trisomal glutathione before his workouts. And obviously with his pattern, his neurochemistry has to be constantly activated to maintain his state that his brain is firing so he doesn't get into a depressive disorder. So a lot of times with bipolar activity, you just have to keep that brain firing and functioning and firing and functioning, and if you let it go down, then they get into this major depressive disorder. So, from the medical history, I'm like, what would be an ideal day? And let's plan it and make sure you can routinely do it, and he works better with this routine. He works better with routines in his past history. So follow activity's daily living routine to maintain brain neurochemical activity throughout the day. Special emphasis on reading. He needed that reading time, 8 to 10 o'clock. He needed that yoga at 4 o'clock. He needed that energy boost, and then he could plan his project planning in the evening for the next day, and that seems to really help his integration. So he's just got to stay consistent with that. If he can stay consistent with that, then he can feed his brain dopamine levels and stay motivated and keep things going. If he starts, avoiding these things, then he can go downhill, and then he can get into that major depressive disorder state. Now, with a lot of patients like Ali, they tell you everything that works for them, but they just don't put it all together and implement it with them. So you can see your medical history took quite a bit of time, but I think we got all the pieces that we need to see what's working. So, what I didn't do with him is have him fit my model, like, hey, we got to fix your gut first, and here's the repair, replace, re-inoculate protocol, and you have to get rid of every single pathogen you may have in your gut and go down that route, because it would be a waste of time, and he's already done things like that in the past. But he's telling us, I need a routine. Routine really works for me. My diet seems to work, but I just can't sleep at night. So we're trying to figure out how to make those things all work with patterns that are really important. With chronic patients like Ali that have experimented with a lot of things, when you go through and dig all the things that have worked for them, you start putting them together, and then that could be a really good way to just maintain normal function, and they start to make that connection, and then their quality of life and everything starts to change. That's what we're hoping will happen to him. Now, the other thing we talked about in phase 1 is we need to develop some strategies to help him recover when he gets into this depressive pattern and really get his brain neurochemistry back up. And when he's a depressed state, I wanted to really support his dopamine, serotonin, and epinephrine or epinephrine systems, and start getting him to do some physical activity, moving and driving. So I recommended when he gets into a down stage, it's so great that he has his wife to help him, but start taking some dopatone, serotonin, catechostem. Dopatone basically has precursors to raise dopamine levels. Serotonin active has precursors and to raise serotonin activity, like 5-HTP. Catechostem has key stimulants that can activate epinephrine or epinephrine. We don't want him to take it past 2 o'clock because we don't have to disrupt his sleep. But the goal here is to really just increase his neurochemical responses. And neurotransmitter support, if it's given ongoing and on a regular basis, it just stops having an effect. So we want to have him have these in times of need. Get his neurochemistry up, start to have him physically move and walk, get some cognitive activity, whether it's walking, hiking, driving, and also rocking back and forth in a chair. The reason I put this in here is that during the physical examination, when we had him check otolithic activity, he had some imbalances doing that type of response, and we saw some square wave jerks. So I think some otolith integration may be involved, and also driving. When you drive, you're getting that translation forward that's activating the otoliths. So I want to see if I can get some responses with rocking back and forth in a chair. And then I want some weekly emails. Accountability is something that he seems to crave, and it's something that helps monitor his care. So are there any patterns of bloating? If there's any patterns of bloating with his diet, it needs to change, because as long as he's getting bloating, he's going to get gut-brain disruption. He's going to promote his SIBO pattern and go the wrong way. So we have to completely eliminate any patterns of bloating. Consistency and following daily routine. We want to see how consistent he is to follow step 5 here. And then, what are good days versus bad days? So he's saying he's got 80% of the time he's got bad days, and 20% of the time he has good days. And another way he explained it was, for sure 3 weeks out of the month I'm bad, and have that 1 week to catch up with work and do some things and be able to survive in society, basically. So this is all phase 1. And we have to see how he responds to this. This may take him 2 to 3 months to figure this all out, and we have to see if this protocol works, and make some adjustments to when he gets in a depressive state, if we can get him out of it. So there'll be some trial and error. This may switch over time, but this whole phase 1 could take several months to fine tune. And then as soon as this starts to get stable and we're getting some change, we'll probably still be working through it. We want to start supporting his physiology for people who have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. People that have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, they can't eat good source of dietary fiber, so their short-chain fatty acids go down. So we want to give them some short-chain fatty acids. People that have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth end up with intestinal permeability from the bacterial lipopolysaccharides that are generated in the small intestine that then cause permeability in that upper GI. So we want to support that. Clearvite GL is a grainless product to support phase 1, phase 2, but it's also a multivitamin, and it has none of the botanicals or herbs or nutrients that can feed small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. There's no monosaccharides or disaccharides or fructooligosaccharides in there. And most people that end up with SIBO end up with not only multi-nutrient deficiencies, but they also become fat-soluble deficient. So ADK is just a source of vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. And then SIBObiotic are just strains of probiotics that have been shown to be tolerable in SIBO patients. We want to really just keep his gut healthy, despite the fact he's got to, follow the extremes of a FODMAP diet. So this is phase 2. There's going to be some overlap between phase 1 and phase 2. I would guess probably in the first 2 to 3 months. And then implement both of those. And then once we get him stable, the goal is just to keep his brain function healthy and integrate and see what things work for him. And it's at some point all the way throughout this care, we have to always improve his frontal lobe. We're here frontal lobe integration because he's got symptoms of attention deficit he's had his whole life. He's adult ADD, major depressive disorder is adult ADD. His inability to activate executive function is there. But these frontal lobe integration issues are not related to lack of plasticity. It's just the neurochemical discharge may be off. So we want to see what we can do. Now, basically for him, the more good days he has and starts to work and focus and plan and do executive function, that's actually helping his frontal lobe. But frontal lobe integration exercises could also be just like coordinated exercise and movements where he's focusing on a target or a ball or playing tennis or playing ping pong or doing anything where there's timing and coordination and movement. Mitochondria optimization strategies, when we go deeper into all the different bioenergetic pathways that go into the brain. Right now, we're just trying to get him out of his crisis patterns and calm down his brain-gut-brain axis patterns and get his neurochemistry just working so he doesn't have those depressive patterns. At some point throughout his care, we need to make sure he doesn't develop hypothyroidism and monitor his TSH. We can do that right away, do a lab test and check his TSH when he's in a low period. And, there could even be the time where his levels are borderline or normal, and he may even consider working with someone to try some natural thyroid hormone replacement, see if that has any impact in improving his overall function. Obviously, it's not going to cure his symptoms, and none of the things in here and none of these protocols have any potential to cure his condition. I don't think his condition is curable, but these things may make a dramatic impact on his function, and we're classifying his function as having more good days than bad days. And we want to shift his 80% bad days and 20% good days to the opposite, where he has, 80% good days and only 20% bad days, or he's functioning 3 weeks out of the month versus 1 week. If we can do that, then I think it would be a clinical success. So that's the case wrap up here with Ali.